Mark. How are you? Thank you for accepting the invitation to join this project. How are you doing today?
Fantastic. No, it's really great to be part of it and connecting everybody from around the world. I mean, I think you're doing an amazing job in bringing all those faces together in one place. So it's fantastic.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for being a part of it. We have, for those who are watching the first time, we have Mr. Mark Ortmans from England. And the of this project, Mark, and for everyone watching, is to create a space where we invite international experts like Mark from different markets around the world to talk about the cultural and communication aspects of doing business in their countries. So, as I've done with the other interviewees, we have seven standard questions, and if you're ready, we can start now.
Sure, shoot.
The
Yeah.
first question, Mark, is tell us a little bit more about you and what kind of work that you do, so everybody can learn more about your background.
Uh, Gosh, yeah, my problem is I'm very good at saying what if and then running with another idea. So I wear a lot of hats. So the main one is as the chair of the Global Entrepreneurship Network. And for those that don't know, that started back in 2008 as Global Entrepreneurship Week and just grew and grew. And now it's in 200 countries every November. You'll find events happening all over the world. So when people say, where's it happening? We always say everywhere. Um, and the purpose really was originally to just bring entrepreneurship to people's attention as an opportunity and really an alternative to taking a job. Why not make a job? And anyway, it's grown and grown, and we've become a network. We have a congress that we run usually every year, bar pandemics. And so we have a ministerial, we have research going on, all sorts of things. There's several other aspects of what we do, and then we're on a country basis like UK, where I am, where we are helping promote and support the ecosystem, the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So yeah, so that means we get involved with not just Global Entrepreneurship Week every year, but also other programs we've set up. So for example, we've got one which is called Restart Ukraine. And in that instance, we've been supporting female founders from Ukraine who have wished to or needed to start or restart their business because of the war that broke out 2 and a bit years ago now. And then we have also an online platform called the Gen UK Hub. If you're looking for it, it's genukhubhub.org, and you can sign up for free and join the community. But that's really an opportunity, what I call a virtual clubhouse. So we operate that. And then we get involved with all kinds of other topics. So my what if problem is 3 years ago, we started something called Startup Planet, which is a conference which brings together the green and blue entrepreneurs doing net zero solutions with the net zero focused policymakers and investors. And the idea is break down those barriers and try and bring them all together. So I'm now planning a platform for that. So just to make my life harder. And also we launched last year, I launched something called the LaZero Innovation Prize, which brought submissions from 32 countries, I think, of, again, incredible innovation from entrepreneurs from around the world, startups with solutions. So trying to showcase, the good news that there's some fantastic ideas out there which can help solve climate change. So that's another thing keeping me busy, planning that for this year. And all of this is very different to what I was doing. I had a career in TV and branding. I trained as a designer originally. It just shows we can all find ourselves wandering off down different paths as you go through your career adventures.
No, fantastic. Thanks, Mark. You do wear a lot of hats, and It's an area which I'm very passionate about, entrepreneurship too. I've been working for almost 22 years in this area. I do know the Global Entrepreneurship Week. I've been part of many of them when I lived in Washington, and in Latin America, I've been involved with a few of them. So it's fantastic, fantastic, and I know the impact it has on the entrepreneurs. So congratulations on that, and good luck with all the work that you're involved in. Thank you, Mark. For the second question, what are some things you recommend people to do or say when first meeting or speaking with someone with whom they might want to initiate a project or business opportunity together in England? And also, what should someone not say or do when they have this first contact with someone in England?
Gosh, that's quite a tough question, really, because to generalize is quite hard, because circumstances can vary, and also the people you meet. I mean, we all know that some of the people you meet in business are super busy and don't give you much time. Others are going to be much better listeners, and depending on their interest in you and what you're wanting to talk about, that will hugely vary. So I think overall, I think it's, this is almost a universal thing, probably world over, though it always helps to show some degree of respect for the other person. So just being courteous and polite, recognizing that you're asking them to stop doing what they were thinking they were going to do in the next 5-10 minutes, to interrupt them with your story. So the more you can make that feel relevant to them, there's a reason why they should continue to listen to you. I think it's also doing it in steps. Don't try and get the whole story down in the first instance. Tease, if you like. It's rather like if you go into the branding game, you're always asked to come up with the 7-second elevator pitch. And it was always called the elevator pitch because the idea was if you managed to get somebody you wanted to target and collar, and you got in an elevator, you probably had 7 seconds till one of you had to get out. So that's how quickly you had to deliver it. So distill, really, really get it back down to the absolute, get it down to a sentence or two, what it is. And it's fine if it doesn't tell the whole story, because what you actually want people to do is say, well, tell me more. What do you mean by that? Exactly how? Why would you do that? And so on. So it starts the conversation. I think just not to be too pushy or aggressive. Again, that's a fairly universal thing that the world will tell you as well, apart from UK. On the whole, people tend to be quite polite here, courteous. They are prepared to give you the first few minutes to say something, and then they may dismiss it. It's rather like if you're in a networking situation, somebody will say, I have to go and freshen my drink, or forgive me, I have to go and speak with that person before they go. So they'll make some excuse if they don't want to continue, but that might be fine. I think there's a big difference too when you're meeting people face to face as opposed to online, or even trying to reach out to people on LinkedIn or some other way of reaching people. I think I would add one last thing to that is introduction. So if you know somebody who is a mutual connection, ask them to make an introduction, so that you're not a cold face straight in, from nowhere, like, who are you and why are you talking to me? It's, oh, John told me that we should maybe have a chat. And suddenly somebody's going to give you a lot more time on that basis because of the mutual feeling you feel for that intermediary contact. So.
No, definitely, Mark, absolutely. Especially business people are very busy. They have limited time. You have to catch their attention, and there's a little bit of stereotype, perhaps, that in maybe some European or American, Canadian markets, things people are moving faster. So you need to be quick when you have this first encounter sometimes. But yeah, thank you. All valid insights. Thank you so much, Mark. The third question, we recognize that it is important to have a deeper cultural understanding of a local place when doing business. What cultural aspects might be considered when doing business in England? And you know, I actually never been to England. It's a place I need to go. But England is very international. London is one of the most international cities in the world. How does that play when you have a foreign business person coming in to have meetings with different local counterparts and clients?
Yeah, no, again, it's very important not to generalize just because it's a country. So, as you say, London, probably one of the most international cities. I mean, not many people know, but 300 languages are spoken in London. 300. So that kind of gives you some idea as to the diversity culturally of the city. It's the reason why our food has got better, because we're not dependent on British cuisine. If it was ever to be given the French word cuisine, but there you are. New York is a good example of a similar city where, you know, you don't stand out as different because you're an international or you come from some other part of the world. You're just yet another person from in the mix. However, you know, if you go to a small state town, or you go to a small town in the UK, then you will be exotic, if you like, that you know, oh, you're the first person from this country I've met. So they're curious or potentially a little suspicious because they don't know anything about you and their culture, in your culture, because that's the other part, is some ignorance of what you represent or what your country and culture is. Or there's a misunderstanding. They have some opinion about it that's not based on fact. It's just something they read or some, you know. So, so I think where you're having that cultural connection is really critical to understanding how to play it. As you say, I think if you recognize that the big cities tend to give you less time, equally, people in smaller towns will tend to be a little bit more relaxed on that, particularly as they haven't heard a story like yours, probably. So, or you're going to be only the second or third person they've met from your country. So, and that, again, you can find that across, you know, swathes of the United States or potentially parts of Europe. I mean, Europe actually is quite different because, and equally the UK, there's a lot of cross-border travel goes on. And so, and quite often you'll find there's a kind of international mindset that people might live in one country, were born in another, and work in a third. You know, so they're very content and comfortable with crossing, you know, cultural lines, and in fact seeing it as enriching and something that makes them feel stronger and more connected with the world, really. But so I think really beware of the people who are have grown up in their bubble, never traveled, didn't leave their shores, and have a certain view of the world that might not be the same.
Yeah, no, very clear, Mark. And I think one takeaway is also, if you're a foreign business person coming into England, the UK, is to understand who you're going to be meeting with. You said there are 300 languages spoken in London, and who is your counterpart on the other side? Who is you going to be your business partner, your client? So understanding this cultural aspect is important. So it's very, very interesting that this international mindset. Thank you. Going to the fourth question, if someone does not speak English, what do you suggest a foreigner do to be able to communicate more successfully with locals in England and to be able to do business there?
Well, this is kind of a shaming question for the Brits, that we are probably the laziest country in the whole world about speaking any other language other than English. And it's an arrogance that's been running for centuries, that the rest of the world must speak English if they want to communicate with us. And, you know, as a result, it's become the language of business internationally. So, but that is great for the rest of the world because they've had to learn a second or third language, whereas we're still stuck with one. So we really are cannot be proud of that fact. However, it makes it quite easy for us in many ways, but it's not very easy for those people visiting. So what do you do if you don't speak English? I think that is a barrier. However, there's, I mentioned, if you're in London, you'll find quite a few people have got a second or third or fourth language in their repertoire that they can intervene and support. So that works. I think if you're really stuck, there's some great apps out there. It's not perfect, it's very clunky, but you can get some communication across. And certainly if you're writing it, using Google Translate or whatever, is a way of getting the message, understood. So there's that, and then, as I say, an intermediary. But otherwise, I'm not quite sure what you do. You're stuck with a slightly limited skill set from the British point of view in knowing other languages. We've probably got one of the lowest second language rates, I'm going to guess. But
exactly. The idea of the question was to really understand the local understanding of a second language, or the access of the locals to speak a different language. But like you mentioned, in London, so international, the foreign person coming in, the likelihood of them finding a translator that can join the meeting is pretty high, because there's so many languages spoken there. But well noted. I think people can understand the reality on the ground. Thank you, Mark. Moving to the fifth question: to get better results in visibility or sales, what are your recommendations on the most effective ways to do marketing for products or services in England? So it's more, the idea of the question is more kind of marketing channels. How do you usually communicate or reach the customers in England?
Well, I think in recent years, it's a lot has happened online, partly because it's largely free or very low cost to promote, via Instagram, Facebook, and everything else. And that building a social media presence is a good idea. I think partly because we're also a very digitally engaged nation. I think we've got one of the highest levels of engagement. So people are looking, they are seeing. So I think it depends. If you start to get a marketing budget, like the old days, you never sold anything without a marketing budget in a marketing department. Then you'd start spending it on some advertising, so some boosted posts online, but also running events. That's another way of getting people out. Depends again, what kind of customer are you looking for? Are you looking to just influence and get your name and brand out there, build some awareness, or are you actually trying to move product? So there's for example, you can do, there's quite a fashion these days, and it's a lot easier than it ever was, which is to set up pop-up shops. So a pop-up store. So these are unused spaces that might have been a store for something which the real estate owner will make available. So you can literally go in and do something for a few days or weeks. And then there's a lot of markets and so on. So there's quite a vibrant opportunity to actually do it on the ground in person, where you can choose your marketplace. Again, so if you're kind of finding customers via geography, what is the footfall, who's going to walk past your store. And that's quite an affordable way of doing it, because you're only paying for that short period. Then, of course, tying up with other brands. Again, if you're getting into the retail side, can you get your product into store as a kind of guest brand, even if it's a trial period? So there's that kind of opportunity. So quite a well-developed retail world. It's quite sophisticated, and also quite innovative. A lot of new ways of trying to do things. So I think those opportunities are good. I always come back down to networking. and the more face-to-face you can do, that's where the opportunities open up. And it's the thing that disappeared during the pandemic when we all had to go online was all the people you were going to talk to were on that call, and there was nobody else because they weren't invited. But if you went to, this evening to an event and there's 50, 100 people in the room, and you start walking around and starting to talk to people, you've got the serendipity bit, the key S word that says that person just starts to talk to you because they dropped their teaspoon or something on the floor, and the conversation starts. And before you know it, suddenly that person could lead to being a business partner, or they know somebody you're trying to get in touch with. So the serendipity is really, really critical, because that's how you really make some breakthroughs. But more to the point, it's actually once you've had that physical meeting, it's much easier to follow up online. So whether that's LinkedIn or email or Zooms, whatever you might do subsequently. So I think that would be a key. Other marketing sides, I think promoting through social media is a very good start point. If you look at any of those channels, you'll see quite a lot of stuff popping up. And as I say, marketplaces and pop-ups. That would be my first thoughts. Again, depends on the sector whether those are all relevant, depending on what kind of, are you B2B, B2C, what kind of business you're trying to do.
Yeah, definitely. Networking, I'm a strong believer, and I like networking a lot. So I agree with you. Just to finalize on the social media again, what platforms are mostly used there in England? Like Instagram, Facebook. What do companies, a foreign company coming in, where should they set up a business account? In what platform that you would recommend?
Instagram's pretty big here, and Instagram's really quite a good way of, because they put a lot of ads in your feed, certainly into mine, and you can find yourself going down that rabbit hole of more info and almost getting to the point of buying. But so that's a great way of showcasing a product. Facebook again, and you've got Facebook Business. So there's those are pretty huge. LinkedIn, I think, has the advantage of selling in a different way, which by doing posts. So talk about the purpose of your business. Talk about why this has really got a vision and it's exciting, and get to know us and find out more. So that might be more the B2B connections you're looking for, rather than just selling products to consumers. But it's a good way of starting to really put out your values and your convictions and why it's different, what you stand for, and even teasing that next month you're going to be releasing something. Keep an eye out, because people do read those posts. So I think that's definitely worth considering. But as I say, we're on all the platforms these days. So Twitter, now called X, is pretty big. But again, I think that's more about opinion rather than selling products. So I wouldn't choose that as the first platform. That would be kind of also in the mix, but I wouldn't be leading with that. What else have we got there? So there's, there are a lot of other options out there on the to get into marketplaces online, but I think that social media is the best place, because you can tell your story in a more imaginative way, and that's the thing. It's not just having a store. It's, as I said earlier, things like purpose can be part of the story that you're telling, and even getting not as kind of bold as a testimonial, which is quite hard sell, but telling a story around a kind of a personal user's experience. How did it transform their life, or what was the pleasure? So getting back to really the way advertising traditionally has always told stories to persuade you to buy a product. Be a little kinder and gentler on the storytelling, and make a human connection. It's all those old classic reasons why ads worked and why they didn't still apply, whether you're on social media or TV or newspapers.
Sure, no, you covered everything. Thank you so much. It's very clear. Because in these interviews I'm doing in some countries, you do see people using more LinkedIn, or they recommend Instagram. But I think your vision, it's understood that all these platforms are useful for different reasons, for different purposes, right? Segments. Thank you, Mark. Very clear. If a business partner, the sixth question, if a business partner in England wants to get to know you better, invites to a local coffee or tea place or a pub in England, a restaurant, or even to do a virtual happy hour, what kinds of topics do people in England like to talk about, and not related to business? So this is really to generate empathy. How do you connect with the locals? How do they do that in England?
Yeah, I think it completely comes down to the person you're meeting with. So, if you just take age demographic, are they young and single? Are they married? Do they have kids? Are they a grandparent? So in each of those, their interests will be different, as you can imagine, just because of their life stage. So, do your kids go to school locally here? And particularly if there's some connection that you're both parents, for example, so you can talk about where do you take your kids on holiday, or the kind of challenges you're meeting with teenagers or whatever. And then in terms of other topics, it would be if you're meeting in their local neighborhood, so learning a little bit more about why it's a great place. What is there something I should go visit while I'm here? And then are they into sport or something like that? So then football or might be a topic. If they're a supporter of a particular team, how long you've been supporting them, and how they're doing this year. Are they going up or down in the league, and that stuff. Politics is quite big. Particularly as we've got an election year coming up this year, 2024, whenever the government decides to tell us when that is. And politics, we're just touching on the fact that certainly if you're in the bigger cities, there's more of that, getting back to that international dimension, that people right now, will be talking, in April 2024 about the terrible situation in Gaza. They'll be talking about Ukraine. They'll be talking about the American presidential race. So those are all topics that are outside our country, but they're on our news agenda every day. So they're probably lead stories, yet they're not from the UK. So, which indicates that we do talk about a lot of stuff that's outside our neighborhood, out of our country. So politics would be an area, I think, that you could touch. But again, you've got to be deciding whether that person's into politics or not. And also, it's relatively depressing subjects on all of those. So if you're trying to have an upbeat, friendly meeting, then it's all getting maybe too serious to be going down those roads. But and then otherwise, we'll always be talking about the weather, of course, and the food. These are all standard things from a lot of other countries too. But because climate change makes weather a topic for everybody. Because everybody's spring is either late or early, or it's too wet, or it's too hot, or it's too dry. Everything's too much of what it should be. So that those are kind of typical kind of subjects. But really, I think first thing is, who are you talking to? What kind of life stage are they at, and what are they likely to have buzzing around their daily life as topics that matter to them that are not business. So.
Yeah, very interesting. This is the first person I'm interviewing yourself that talks about the life stage. It's very interesting. aspect to take into account. Sports is very common in Latin America, where I'm from. We always talk about soccer, football.
Yeah.
And weather has come up, and politics in some places that some people I've spoken with, they say, don't talk about politics. You cannot get into politics.
Yeah.
But I guess the local reality there, as you're explaining, is interesting. This interest of talking of topics outside of your own country, it's something very interesting. People can take into account when they come down there. And the life stage, knowing who you're speaking with, and that's especially in an international city. Again, going back to the international city, you have to know who you're going to be speaking with, what's their background, what's their. Thank you, Mark. The last question
Yeah.
is related to just also creating this empathy, right, with a local person. What one word should everyone learn to say in English in England, in the context of England or UK, and why? Why should they learn how to say this one word?
That is a tough question. Just one word. And
Or a phrase, Mark.
right. I mean, the kind of the easy answer there would be kind of please and thank you, because again, it's that respect. And the word thank you is not used enough when it's meant. And so I think that's a starter. You can get into a lot of kind of colloquial slang phrases and so on, but then you've got to be careful, because whichever one you pick, it won't necessarily be used by the person you're going to use it with. So it might sound inappropriate or too kind of try hard to be down with the English. It doesn't kind of work. It's what we call the Dick Van Dyke effect, which is when Dick Van Dyke was in Mary Poppins, the movie from many, many, many years ago. He's always cited as the person who was trying to sound like an English chimney sweep from the last century, but still sounding like an American trying to do an English accent. So kind of Mary Poppins, ho ho ho, ye olde London, and it was just not convincing at all. So sometimes it's better to stay away from that until maybe pick up something they say. That's the other thing, is follow the lead. Yeah, so I don't think there's a need to do it, other than, as I say, just the straightforward thing of, you're going to find people are going to give you more time a day if you're polite, and that's not being over formal about it, by the way. Being very, we're pretty informal these days, the Brits, so there isn't people don't tend to wear ties unless it's a job interview or a funeral. So and actually, I was joking with somebody this morning about that, just saying that when you see somebody wearing a tie, say, oh, you got an interview, and usually you got a 50-50 chance of getting that wrong. And I said, no, it's my grandmother's funeral. Sorry, wish I hadn't asked the question. But so the formality thing is not an issue here for us in the UK. So yeah, I think going with the flow. Do you know what? Just listen and hear, what is their enthusiasm, their interest, their passion, and just follow, mirror, as they say in psychology terms, mirror somebody, and you're, at least while you're getting started, and then you can be yourself as you get to know each other better. But so I think on the whole, it's a pretty welcoming country. People say that if they're stuck on the street and they ask directions or whatever, they will get instant help. People will go out of their way. They'll walk the wrong way down the road with them if necessary. So I think people will find people are very kind on the whole. Doesn't mean everybody is. There's some rude people out there, as there are in every country. But on the whole, they'll get a good reception. So welcome to Britain. Coming. Yeah.
No, thanks, Mark. I'm going to take note of all these insights, because on my first trip, I hope to do a first trip soon to England, and it was really enlightening. For me, it did. I've worked with many English colleagues and friends, but it did give me a lot of useful insights. So I appreciate you sharing this with us. And that's the final part of the interview. Thank you, Mark, for being part of the project. I appreciate you sharing your insights, recommendation, your experiences. I hope this interview also benefits you and brings you opportunities as well for all the different activities, initiatives that you're involved in. I will leave your contact information in the summarized article. And any final comments? Yeah.
Yeah, no, if they want to, they can reach out via LinkedIn. Yeah, no, I think this is a great thing you're doing, and I think it's really helpful if people have some indication as to what to expect when they're going to start interacting with people from another culture. And I think it's quite important to see it as cultures. It's a bit like, and maybe see cities rather than countries, because countries tend to have a whole mix. And it's kind of indicated actually by, pretty much every country's got political divides or opinion divides on all sorts of topics, and it will often divide by cities versus country or different parts of the country. I think recognizing that cities are the kind of new countries is the way to look at it. So anyway, we'd be delighted to see people come over to the UK.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to go soon, and thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and your insights.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Mark. Bye.
Thanks, Rafael.